Story 1. So it was my mom's birthday. We were barbecuing, and we got her to stay inside and prep food so we could decorate the front with balloons and streamers. Well, we got the whole thing done in secret as hoped, but then we realized there was no way we could get all the leftover decoration material and balloon pump inside without her noticing. There are two ways into our house: the back door that leads into the garage and then into the kitchen where Mom was, and the front door which is visible from the kitchen sink. So, I told my brother I would go in from the back door and distract her while he brought the stuff in through the front and down the hall past the kitchen. Once I got in the kitchen, it occurred to me that I had no plan of attack. So I just said, "Hey Mom, look at this dance I made," and started swaying, bopping up and down, doing jazz hands and going la 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 la. Mind you, I'm like 17 years old in this scenario. So she's just watching me, and when my brother comes in and is sneaking through the hall behind her with all the stuff, I keep telling her, "Wait, it's about to get good." And she kept watching in confusion. The second he was in the clear, I stopped and said, "Okay, that's it." And that was that. We succeeded. Edit, wow. Thanks for the gold. It's my first award. Story 2. In my freshman year of college, my grades were really not great, and my parents were very strict about getting good grades. When my dad asked to see my grades, I panicked and used the inspect command on the computer, where you can change the text on the screen to display different words and letters. I changed all of my poor grades to good grades. My dad was so happy that I did well my first year of school. He asked me to print my results. I did, and it turned out he had to send them to our car insurance company for a good student discount. Ultimately, I committed insurance fraud by accident, but I got the discount. Story 3. When I was 7 years old, I was playing in my back garden with those incredibly bouncy little balls. I would bounce them high off the house and let them bounce randomly before trying to catch them, as you did. One time, I went for a huge throw off the wall, and it bounced crazily off various surfaces so fast I completely lost track of it. So, my 7-year-old logic was to stand back in the same place and throw another ball the same way. I watched it bounce this way and that about 10 times before finally hitting a plant and coming to rest in a flower bed. I went over to pull back the foliage, and sure enough, there were both balls literally lying touching each other in the mud. At the time, I was like, yep, makes sense. But over the years since then, I've often thought about it and how it worked. Story 4. Wearing a motorcycle helmet while snowblowing. I did it because I missed riding, it kept my face warm, and when snow would fly back at me, the visor would protect me. Story 5. When I was younger, I got called into human resources because I drew a very detailed picture of a penis. It was really, really good. The human resources meeting happened about a week after I drew it, and my only defense was, "I don't recall doing that. Do you happen to have the picture? It might jog my memory." They didn't have it, of course, because I had it, and since I didn't confess, they couldn't do anything. Investigation results inconclusive. Have a nice day. Story 6. A storm broke a limb on a tree hanging over my house in my backyard, but it was still hanging on by a few splinters. I didn't want it to fall, and it wasn't in a place where I could use my ladder to reach it. So I found some rope, tied a brick to it, threw the brick and rope over the limb, made a crude rope swing, and swung and pulled at the branch until it finished breaking. It wasn't until I was using the chainsaw to cut it up that I realized how many times during my foolish idea I could have easily hurt or even killed myself. Story 7. A friend and I once snuck 15 people into a warped tour by giving them some bracelets from a party supply store and clipboards full of paper. We walked up to the side gate and said we were with Rock the Vote. The security guard waved us right in. Story 8. I forgot to bring a resume to a job interview, but I had an index card in my bag. I cut the index card in half and wrote my name, my contact information, and creative problem solver in my best handwriting, and gave a copy of my business card to both the interviewers. I got the job. Story 9. When I was young and broke, I bought a sofa from a used furniture store. I had no way to take the sofa home. I went to a used car lot a couple of blocks away and took a truck for a test drive. Story 10. Not my idea, but my mom's. I dropped one of my earrings and couldn't find it, so she threw my other earring on the floor and it happened to land next to the first one. Story 11. I'm stuck on a cliff, But if I jump at a really sharp angle at that gravel field, I could just slide down there and be fine, just like in television. Every time I think about this, I am amazed I'm not either flattened by a rock or impacted against something. Childhood really is just the tutorial level sometimes. Story 12. In college, I was taking a class that required me to purchase an online textbook and workbook registered under my name, ensuring that each student would have to buy a new online copy each semester instead of buying used textbooks. I had a friend who took this class a semester before me, so we came up with the idea to message customer service and explain that I had recently gotten married, so my last name had changed, and I legally changed my first name from my friend's first name to my first name, and I would need them to change it in their system. It totally worked, and the representative even congratulated me on my marriage. Story 13. Real estate told me I had to have the carpets professionally cleaned or I would lose my $800 bond. I did some research and found out I could become an accredited carpet cleaner as there are no official licensing boards in my state. So I did what any sane person would do. I paid the $85, did the online course, and got my certificate. Registered a business name and an Australian business number. I handed the property management a copy of my accreditation and an invoice for services. I became a professional carpet cleaner and launched a vacate cleaning business that is still going 6 months later. Edit to add, I did clean the carpets. They claimed I didn't and required a professional cleaner's invoice as proof. So I gave them the proof. I did not charge the real estate agency. It was a copy of the invoice they claimed to require. I do professional housekeeping and cleaning for vacating a property at the end of a lease to ensure you get maximum bond back. I help people who are being unfairly treated by their property management and advise them on what steps to take regarding cleaning, repairs, etc. With the return of the bond and some smart shopping, I was able to purchase my own equipment to continue the job. I then claimed those costs back on tax. I wrote this and fell asleep, so waking up to a bunch of positive feedback is pretty cool. Thank you, Reddit, and your love for spite. Story 14. This idea could have easily gotten me fired if it went wrong. I was working as an art director at an animation studio, making videos for clients. One client was especially particular about the use of yellow in the background. They wanted it to match their logo, which was a horrible neon yellow. We advised against it, but after numerous calls, we had to agree and provided a version with that color. They hated it and asked for a change. What followed were 12 versions with numerous calls in between, tweaking the color over and over. Eventually, I got tired of it and just sent the original version again. I didn't even bother to rename the file. The client said, "This looks exactly the way I wanted, thank you." How that ever went right, I still have no idea. Story 15. I used to know a guy who, every week, would order his Saturday night curry for delivery while sitting in the pub and then walk over the road to the curry house and get it and himself delivered home. This went on for about 10 to 12 weeks. One week, we were sitting having a pint, and the owner of the curry house walked in, took his order, and had him picked up from the pub. He said it was easier for everyone concerned. Story 16. I once faked being sick when I was in middle school and told my mom I had a sore throat and felt a cold coming on. She took me to the doctor, and it turned out that I did, in fact, have strep throat. Story 17. Dressing like a redneck to pick up girls. I went to college in the South, but the guys there were all very preppy. I thought because a lot of the girls grew up in the South, they would be drawn to more of a redneck vibe that not many people on campus had. So I bought a camouflage fishing hat. Literally had 3 girls start conversations with me that day. Story 18. Bobcat tire blew during a job. Had another tire, but no jack. Positioned the Bobcat behind a dump truck. Bobcat then tried to lift the rear end of the dump truck. Dump truck was very heavy, so Bobcat lifted itself instead. Tire changed and back to work. Story 19. There was a swarm of hornets that had made a nest under the front of our porch with only one specific narrow entry in or out. Spray wouldn't work, and it was right under our front door, so we had no way to keep exterminating them. Then I realized, why not use whirring blades of metal? We did have an old 1950s metal fan, and I could maybe blow them away from the entrance so they had no way to get in. The unanticipated effect was that it worked, though after a few hours, It had created a Civil War battlefield of dead or dying hornets piling up like a zombie tower in World War Z. Every few moments, you'd hear a thunk as another hornet fell into the trap. So satisfying. Story 20. Far from the dumbest working idea in the thread, but I once got an extra day to work on a video project in high school by coming to class with a video that was just a quarter second of blackness. I eagerly volunteered to go first, then acted confused and scared when the file didn't work. The teacher took pity on me and told me to just bring it the following day. I got to finish it that evening and still received full credit as if I had done it on time. Story 21. I was really desperate to leave my past employer after 15 years. I had been applying and interviewing but striking out. Finally, I got an interview at a place where I felt, I am not really sure this is right for me, but anything is better than where I am. Instead of preparing for the interview and rehearsing answers, I was cocky and unconcerned, making it seem like I was happy where I was and did not really care if I got the job or not. They called me back the next week, and I waited a week to return their call. It was the same deal with the second interview. When they offered me the job, I hesitated, said I needed to think about it really hard, and that it was a significant move for me. I came back and demanded well over $15,000 above what they were offering in salary. They accepted. Story 22. Using a sewing needle to remove a bit of dirt that was making one of my records skip. Bear in mind my hands are shaky as hell, so it was certainly very tense, and there was the danger of messing up the whole thing. Edit. Thanks to everyone who gave advice on how to clean records less dangerously. Story 23. I hated my mathematics teacher, and she was making us do a project on patterns even though we were in 7th grade. So, my pattern was a series of increasingly longer sideways drawings. She didn't even notice, and I got an A. Story 24. My parents used to run a bed and breakfast, and we used to keep a section of the house locked with only light security. It was just supposed to stop guests from accidentally going into our living space. We used to keep the key on top of a door frame. Turns out the frame was hollow, and there was a hole on the top. I put the key up there, and it fell into the hole but didn't sound like it dropped all the way to the floor. 14-year-old me didn't realize taking the door frame off isn't a major job. So I was a bit worried my parents would be upset with me. I found myself a wire coat hanger, straightened it out, and attached a magnet to the end to go key fishing. It was more out of desperation than anything else, but it somehow worked. Story 25. I got a really long drill bit stuck in a piece of thick wood, a butcher's block. I tried everything I could think of to yank it out. My solution that ended up working for me was attaching the drill bit to a chain, putting the chain on my truck, and having a piece of wood stuck between two branches of a tree. I drove off slowly, and it popped right out. To those wondering how I hooked up the bit to the chain, the drill bit was a long spade drill bit. The end sticking out of the block was long enough that I could bend it into a little hook. I attached the chain to the hook, bent the hook a little further, and it was now another link in the chain. Story 26. In university, I was late on an assignment that was supposed to be in my teaching assistant's Dropbox by noon that day. I didn't manage to get there until almost 3, so I was sure he had already emptied it. The drop boxes were literal boxes in cubbies with a slot on the front and a lock on them that prevented them from being pulled out. The rack holding them was just a basic metal frame with about 5 rows of boxes. My teaching assistant's box was somewhere in the middle of the shelf. So I figured, I'm late anyway, why not take a chance? And slipped my assignment into the box below my teaching assistant's box. I got my assignment handed back a few weeks later than everyone else, and it had a note from another teaching assistant scribbled on it that said, "Looks like this fell into my box by mistake." I got full marks on the assignment. Story 27. I completed an undergraduate degree in a unique combination of electrical and computer engineering, mathematics, physics, and computer science. I had to do a project or thesis at the end. I wasn't good at writing, so I chose the project. However, I couldn't come up with anything impressive. So I invented the 9-bit byte. It took me just 5 minutes to come up with the idea. Normally, all computers are based on binary, and bytes are 8 binary bits. I had the courage to ask why they couldn't be 9 bits. It's more complicated than that, but I didn't care for complexities. Instead of learning sequences like 000010001 in binary equals 9 in decimal, why not just say 100 million, where the 1 is 9 spaces over equals 9 in decimal? This way, humans could read it. This approach, of course, disrupts everything about binary and architectures based on it, but I wasn't concerned. Who cares if saying 28 in decimal equals 11,100 in binary or 00000010010000000 in my scheme and was incredibly wasteful. I went on to build a CPU that could process them, which was ridiculously impractical, and wrote a small paper about it. The professor commended me for thinking outside the box and gave me a great mark, but advised me not to share this idea with anyone else. So naturally, I'm sharing it here,